Happy Sunday. I hope you guys had a great weekend, and I know some of you might be having a 3-day weekend, so the market will be closed as of tomorrow. So today we're going to have a kind of regular type video that we do on this channel going through what could happen for the week ahead, but I'm going to do things a little bit differently because we have such an important week with the NVIDIA earnings and with the FOMC minutes. I'm actually going to be giving every single day, we're going to do in these videos some daily ranges for the SPY and the Qs. This way we can really monitor, what the options market is expecting for the day-to-day price action. So the way that I'm going to kind of make this a continued thing is smash that like button if you start to like these videos throughout the week. I'm really going to pay attention to the like ratio on these videos to see if this is a format that you guys really enjoy. If you do like these daily expected moves throughout the week, make sure to hit that like button, okay? So I can pay attention to it and we can make it a more regular thing. Now, we do still need to, for today, get into some technical analysis for the SPY, Qs, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, NVIDIA, and AMD, and we're just going to hop right back into it. All right, so starting off with the SPY, we're just going to notice that early on in the week, we did come outside of our monthly expected move. We saw some selling come in, and the next day we did get that CPI data that kind of dropped us off. Now, we did go try to retest this level up here at those highs, and we saw that selling come in one more time. So is this going to be the lower high? That kind of starts to bring us to the downside here, and we kind of see the price action start to flip the other way with this red bar popping up on the histogram. It very much so could be, because we have a very, very important week ahead of us with two very important things happening. So we need to pay attention to our weekly ranges, and the weekly ranges for this week are going to be 506.27 to the upside and 492.75 to the downside. So we really want to pay attention to these risk ranges, because if we see price action get outside of these really early on, I'd say probably just Tuesday or Wednesday, then we could get some kind of reaction to close back in this. Options have priced in only this amount for the entire week, and 68% of the time we do land back within that zone. Now, the important part here is we saw that selling come in with the CPI. We end back within the monthly range. This would be the top side up here at 517. You'll notice once we do get outside of that range, we don't spend much time up there, okay? So it is a good probability that we will land back within this yellow line by the end of the month, and that's something to pay attention to because we're right at the top of it right now. We are going to go into the shorter time frames in this video. So if you did want to point out the things like these divergences we were talking about, we talked about a lot of these divergences in my last video. I encourage you to go click on that video because it really has some good stuff. You're seeing some a little bit higher time frames curl over, get these crossings of MACDs, confirming some divergences, which could mean, the momentum is dead. And if we start to get some bad news with those two big events this week, we can see a pretty dang good sell-off. Okay, so let's get into these shorter time frames though. The 30-minute here is what we've been paying attention to. We noticed there was a triple divergence up here at these highs. Now, you didn't necessarily have that on the RSI at the same time. So we overall stay on this channel, and in my course, I overall say when there's one and not the other, when both of them aren't happening at the same time, most of the time it is some kind of pullback. Now, if we go into a 15-minute, this is what we pointed out early on in the week. We were just stating how this divergence here, okay, so we have a 15-minute divergence outside of what the options market expected for the week, and then we saw that reaction upward, okay, so we saw that reaction upward. Now we set up a new weekly range, and the bottom side is in a similar spot, right? So 492.75, I think it's a little bit lower than last week. So that's something to pay attention to. Now, if we did want to get outside of that again and create some kind of divergence, good chance that we actually bounce back up into this area maybe one more time. So this 15-minute here, the other thing we can point out to the upside that if you were paying attention, you might have caught it this week. There's some divergence up here. There's actually a bunch of 15-minute divergences up here on this MACD and the RSI at the same time. And guess what? Now we're getting a little bit of selling. Now, we did come into a point right here that could be pretty important. Maybe we actually get some kind of reaction up to create a right shoulder, and we get a little head and shoulders that starts the selling going on into possibly Wednesday. Now, we do still need to pay attention to the actual numbers that come out with the NVIDIA earnings and the actual statement that is put out by the FOMC. We really need to actually pay attention to what is said in that and also how the market reacts, because we've seen a lot of Fed speakers come out and say, good news is good news and bad news is good news too. So we could be seeing some kind of hip fire move up. We could break down and then break back up with the FOMC. There's a ton of possibilities. The main thing we want to pay attention to with the technical side is, are we able to get into this negative territory? And I would say, are we able to get into negative territory on this 30-minute? This 30-minute divergence up here was a good hint that we were going to see some kind of selling come in. And if we get some bad news this week, you see we can still get into that negative territory pretty quick. So we're still not looking like, hey, this is the crash and everything's going to burn. No, we need some bad news behind this kind of technical look in order to push us into negative territory. Then we can say, hey, this might be it. The Qs, we have that updated risk range. We have 439.91 to the upside and 421.23 to the downside. Now, the important thing with last week was we actually came up to the top side of our monthly range and we saw that resistance come in pretty quick. Then we got that CPI data. So this is before we actually got CPI data. We saw that selling come in. That's the resistance that can come in with these monthly ranges. They're very, very useful. Now, as we were talking about earlier in this week, we were just saying, hey, look at this trend line here. It really looks like we might start to break through that. We've seen some hip fire moves outside of it, but then we had this 15-minute divergence down here. So the Qs do have a little bit bigger range this week than the SPY, so that might mean that some tech stocks are going to have a little bit more volatility this week. So that's just something we need to pay attention to. As of right now, we have lost that trend line, so we're going to want to buy that back up. So the positive side here, the bull side would say, hey, we need this MACD to curl up and go further into positive territory. If that happens, hey, there's a good chance that we're actually going to come and test this high, maybe even hit that top side of the weekly range. But if we actually continue this trend and head lower, we could be starting some kind of negative trend, and this would be the bear side. This is what, so the bulls and the bears, you really just want to pay attention to this MACD, see if it is curling up. That would be slightly bullish. If it stays down and gets into this negative territory, then you have a shot to test this low, and you actually could head towards the bottom side of our risk range for the week. Last thing on the Qs that I really think you could pay attention to is this little head and shoulders we were talking about. We got a shoulder over here, we got the head, and we now have a right shoulder. So if we do want to break below this level, get some kind of retest, we could start that negative trend to the bear side. But it's just important to be open to both sides. We have not gotten that serious bad news yet, and we're going to need some bad news in order for this thing to flip over. Apple, we were talking about the fact that it actually could turn around and we could be seeing some kind of push in Apple very, very soon. Now, the range for this week on Apple, it's not looking too high, right? It's not looking too big. So we actually could be getting some kind of hip fire move up. That might just be some kind of trap for the week. So really want to pay attention to that. Like I said, a lot of the time when we do break out of these zones, right? We break down, then we pop in it, then we break down further. This could be testing this zone one more time in order to head lower and break through this very important trend line. So pay attention to the bull side. You do have a 2-hour divergence. It's on the MACD, it's on the RSI at the same time. So you have to pay attention to it. And the other part that you can pay attention to on a shorter time frame, there's this 30-minute, okay? So if we do get a little bit more selling, we actually could see this dip down a little bit lower. Maybe it curls back up, gives you that 30-minute divergence, which a 30-minute divergence behind a 2-hour divergence, very good probability that we're going to see some kind of reaction out of Apple in the near future. Now, that doesn't mean we can't continue the negative trend, right? Because if this curls over and we don't necessarily get a confirmation of some kind of divergence that leads to us getting into positive territory, we could just be breaking through this trend line and continuing this negative trend that we've been in. It's been in a negative trend. If you notice this one right here, it just kept going. We saw that little curl over and then we plunged lower. So that's what we need to pay attention to. And then you actually had a little divergence right in here that we could have had a nice little trade. So really, we just want to be paying attention. Is this remaining in negative territory, or is it going to create maybe some kind of divergence that actually gets us back into positive territory? Amazon, we were looking at this left head and right possible shoulder. Now, we haven't filled this gap just yet, so we could be getting some kind of reaction. This is some consolidation. Looks like we're in a little bit of a range here. So maybe we were looking for some kind of break to the upside or a break to the downside. So there is a bullish and bearish case here. We haven't necessarily gotten the bad news to flip us fully into a negative trend. Now on the 30-minute here, you'll notice we're near that negative territory, but we're right at that center line. So if we wanted to break to the upside, that positivity can come in because we'll be in positive territory. If we want to break to the downside, really look for this base here to fully be taken out, maybe even get a retest and then come back down. Because that's really going to solidify, hey, we're in a negative trend, Amazon is in a negative trend, and maybe we're going to start to head lower with some of the bigger time frames crossing over. Tesla, this was a great trade that we found. Okay, we had a 2-hour divergence down here. We had that steep crash with the earnings that came out. And we see this 2-hour divergence, and it's pretty darn significant, right? The significance of the divergence is something I talk about in my course, and it's very, very good to pay attention to because it gets you closer to that center line, which means more positivity can come in. We get up to that positive territory, we get a pullback, and then we head higher. This looks like just an ABC pattern to continue to go higher. Wouldn't be surprised if we get some kind of reaction to test this little base here. That would be something interesting for Tuesday. But I do believe there is possibly some upside left on Tesla. I just want to click on a 30-minute. You'll notice that we did cross over. I don't necessarily have divergences on the MACD, but I do have them on the RSI. Okay, so you do have these divergences a little bit here on the RSI between these 2 points. That would mainly tell me this might be some kind of pullback if we see some selling come in. So really I'm looking for if there is some kind of pullback to react somewhere around this 194.50, and then maybe we get one more push higher to get back in this important zone, test this level, and fill this gap from a while back. I feel like right there would be a very, very good point for those sellers to hop in. And guess what? It's right by that point that we've been looking at on Tesla for a long time. That very important number, 207.42, is what I will be really paying attention to, and the gap fill. Now on Tesla, if we do get a little bit more selling to come in, you're going to get that MACD to pull down, and maybe we actually do cross back up and create a divergence. Now that hasn't happened yet, obviously, but that's something that I'm going to be looking for this week on Tesla. NVIDIA, if there's one stock that you are trading, if it's NVIDIA, you really should be a part of the Patreon. The expected move for this week is big. I think it's like 100 points up or 100 points down, something around there. But to get the exact numbers, my Patreon's down in the description. Very good week to have those weekly expected moves. We could see NVIDIA hitting 800 this week. We could see NVIDIA hitting 600 this week. I mean, something like that. So we really want to pay attention to NVIDIA. The thing that I'm really looking at on this hourly chart is up here, we saw this divergence, right? We saw this flatness of the MACD, and then we saw that divergence actually here a little bit down on the MACD. We actually saw that divergence a little down. On the RSI, we had that flatness, which tells me, hey, there is possibly some weakness here. If we get some selling, it might just be a pullback. And that's exactly what it was. It was a pullback. But notice we haven't seen that extreme positivity come in yet. Now, why is that? We haven't been able to cross on this MACD. We haven't crossed back up in positive territory, but we very well could before earnings. Okay, so if we do get that selling, I mean, I'm going to pay attention to this either way, but it would be nice if we got a little hint and people got excited before earnings, and then we see that divergence come in. But I don't trade around earnings. I say that all the time on this channel. We've seen Amazon earnings go the opposite way on some divergences. We've seen Tesla really drop off with some divergences behind it. So it's just good to stay away from a lot of these things, a lot of these stocks when they're having earnings right around the corner, because you'll get that extreme volatility. So overall, I'm just going to be mostly trading other stocks this week, but NVIDIA I'll still be keeping my eye on, mainly because of this, what is this? The super micro computer. You notice this huge drop off. If I pull this up on the daily, you're going to see this huge drop off. If I actually side by side these, which I might do for you real quick, if I side by side these, you're going to notice something here. They look pretty similar. Okay, so if I zoom out on this and I zoom out on this, you'll notice that we get a pretty similar thing here, right? We're getting some pops in here, we're getting some pops in here, then we get some consolidation, we start to consolidate a little bit at a higher level, and then we get that blow off top, I would say. We get a really, really rapid move, a really, what's the word I'm looking for? A really parabolic move. That's what it is, parabolic move to the upside. But we noticed that selling did come in. Now, was this just people taking some profit because, you know, it rapidly went above 1,000, and 1,000 is a hard number, so people start to sell once those big numbers, those flat numbers come in. People do start to sell at those. It's a mental thing. So is NVIDIA going to follow suit? It hasn't hit one of those big numbers, but maybe if it's able to get up to an 800, we'll actually see that come in. Really, this has been overbought for quite some time, and even if NVIDIA does produce good numbers initially, is that going to be a value that really makes sense, right? So is that going to be a good enough number in order to say, hey, yes, NVIDIA is worth 800? That's what I'm worried about. We could be getting some kind of quick pop and then a quick sell-off if we start to get towards that weekly expected move. AMD, we were just stating how it looks like we're getting pretty tight, right? We're consolidating pretty tight. Maybe an explosive move is coming. That actually was to the upside as of right now. This could all just be some kind of retest at this point. I don't necessarily see it as a full trap yet. We're still on the 30-minute near the center line here. So if we do curl up, we can see more positivity. Really going to pay attention to those weekly expected moves because the weekly expected move for AMD is actually sitting a little bit above this high. So it would be a good opportunity to test that high, maybe even go a little higher and then see that come back down. So we have to pay attention to this week, especially if that bad news does come in, then a lot of these are going to start to flip the other way. So really pay attention to AMD, NVIDIA, even that SMCI if you'd like. If AMD did actually pop higher here, we could possibly be seeing a short divergence, okay? We could see a divergence here that gets us close to that negative territory, and then we really want to wait for that bad news, right? We need the bad news behind these divergences to push them into negative territory. What that'll do when you get this push down into negative territory, you're going to start that negative trend, take out this base down in here and start to head to lower levels. And we can cut through a lot of stuff pretty quick with this because we don't have a ton of price action. We've moved higher pretty fast on AMD and NVIDIA and SMCI. So we really have to be careful with any kind of negative trend that starts this week because it could open up the floodgates to more selling. Now the VIX on the shorter time frames, I said I wanted to go over this. You'll notice that we do have this pretty steady trend here, and we're seeing some divergence pop up. That's pretty significant on the MACD and RSI at the same time. So we have to pay attention to that. We did leave behind a gap, so we maybe want to go fill this gap up here. But I'm really thinking that maybe we get a pop of volatility and that starts to subside and we come fill this gap. I think that that's definitely on the table for this week. Now, the important thing about the VIX that you need to pay attention to if we do see some selling come in is really just pay attention if it's able to hold above the 200. If we're able to actually hold above the 200 like we did here, good sign, especially since these Bollinger Bands are now spreading out and we're in positive territory. We actually could be seeing volatility that remains in this market for quite some time. We do have that weekly signal that actually did confirm, and we're seeing some strength behind it, okay? So if this is able to get into positive territory, this weekly chart here, if this MACD is able to get into positive territory, we're gonna see volatility in this market for quite some time, and that's why we really have to be careful around these big events like NVIDIA earnings, like FOMC minutes. So the main takeaway here is we are possibly going to be getting some divergences that set up, and we have some stuff that is, way overbought. We have some different stuff like Apple that actually is showing a 2-hour divergence that says, hey, we could actually see the momentum start to shift to the upside. So there's just a lot to pay attention to this week, and I felt that was a good reason to bring out some of those daily expected moves. So pay attention this week because I'm going to be producing, maybe turn on the notifications because I'll be giving you guys those daily expected moves for the SPY and the Qs all week. And make sure to smash that like button if you do like that format because it will encourage me to do that more regularly. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope you are having a great weekend. If you have a 3-day weekend, have some fun tomorrow and then come back for some stocks on Monday night because we'll be putting out that first video with those daily expected moves. Thank you so much. I wish you all the luck in the world trading this week. Peace.